Hello everybody, welcome back to ICNVDriversedition, and today we're going to have another interesting conversation. I did make a video about the C10 concept car that came out, but ultimately we learned a lot of information about that car, and I don't think it's necessary. But if you want to go into more depth about it, let me know and I'll release the video, because ultimately I don't see the point in talking about a car that we would never see hit the street. And people say, what do I say by never hit the street? For the C10 concept to come out the way it actually sits in the two multiple design concepts we've seen and actually hit mass production for the streets, they will need to change safety laws, or should I say uplift some of the safety laws in our country. And considering that everything is actually going tighter, more stricter as time goes on, I don't see that happening. And I bring this up because when you go back to the C10 concept, although it's a very nice concept, it's not that much different from the original C7 concept, which the car kind of strayed far from the one that they traveled around and showed the auto shows. And ultimately, I feel like this is going to be the same way. The main reason is because it uses too much technology, meaning like cameras for side mirrors, rear view mirrors are non-existent. If they are there, they're too slim for safety recalls and things of that nature. So the car is really made more for looks, head turning designs, and of course to push the limits and boundaries of the imagination or the creativity of the people that designed it. So yes, I think it's a nice concept for conversation pieces, and yes, they may take some of the cues from it. Just like if you really look at the car, it has some familiar cues of the Ford GT that's now well over $500,000 in pricing. It has a similar cues of that car, but ultimately, unless you see something very close to the Ford GT, we won't see a production version of this car come out. But I know that alone is an interesting concept. A C10 car that has the same design cues of the Ford. Think about that. But let's get into the real topic at hand. And what I want to sit there and discuss today, because what I want people to recognize and realize that when you don't think it's a problem, it actually is. And I believe the C8 ZR1 may have just changed the Corvette market. Let's talk about it. Okay, let's get to some quick formalities for those that have never been here before. My name is Sho. This is ICNVDriversedition. We're a car community for car enthusiasts that love to drive cars to make you turn your head, that aren't your everyday people movers. But we're also an interactive community, which means if you hit me up on any one of my social media platforms or in the comments below, I'll do my best to respond. And if the topic you bring up, just like this one, is interesting enough, I may even shoot a video on it. Fast forwarding past that, I've been out on vacation. Yes, I've been on vacation. It was long overdue and much needed. But while I was out, I kind of got into a couple of conversations with guys sitting around the pool, around the bar, and so forth. Just doing what guys do when we hang out on vacation while the wives go out and have their fun or interact. And having car conversations felt so heartwarming and touched. But let's not focus on that. One of the conversations that came up was about the C8 ZR1 and the crazy pricing that's going on with this car. And one of the things I pointed out was, for the first time in a long time, we've seen something that we don't normally see. And I've said this before in videos back, let's say 3-4 years ago. I don't want to shuffle through the history of the inventory to find it, but you've heard me sit there and say, if the pricing is right or if the demand is high enough, our favorite dealers that sold at MSRP will start selling over MSRP. So why do I bring this up? Well, there's some interesting facts about this C8 ZR1. The first thing is, we know it's not technically, without the X on the back, the king of the hill. And even with the fact that it's not the king of the hill, and demand is getting even harder, meaning that 300 number that we originally saw for 2025 models, that has dwindled down to maybe 117. I think 107 may be more realistic. And as of right now, there is like 75 or 78 on the streets. Or let's just say there are 78 actually got delivered to dealers. And then less than that, maybe somewhere around 53, possibly 62 that are in the hands of actual customers. And at this point in time, what we're actually seeing is the C8 ZR1 has been selling on average. And I say this not with pure facts, but based off the comments and pricing and things I'm seeing between Facebook, people sharing information and so forth. This car has been selling on average for somewhere right around $75,000 over MSRP. Now, why is this important? Well, remember the upgrades people had when they were trying to sell the C8 Z06 over MSRP and the C8 E-Ray over MSRP and the initial C8 when it first came out over MSRP. Well, at this point, what we're starting to see is even our favorite dealers, Ciocca. Yes, Ciocca, who has always said we would never sell over MSRP and we would sell cars at MSRP. We're the #1 Chevy store in the country. Well, I told you back then, when they start selling used cars for over MSRP, because they've done that in the past when it came to the base C8 and the C8 Z06, which I just felt, and I just, me personally, was it was an internal rotation, meaning that when you contact Ciocca, when the C8 Z06 first came out, and I'm just going to use them for a reference, when the C8 Z06 first came out, the first 20 cars are already allocated to friends and family of the dealership. Now, I'm not saying that's a problem, because if you own a dealership, you have the right to determine where the cars go that you bring into your inventory. But they were one of the first dealers to get used versions of these cars and sell them over MSRP, although they would still sell the regular car at MSRP. Well, today we've heard of at least 2 people that have admitted to getting their car, their C8 ZR1 from Ciocca, and they've paid over MSRP for their car. I'll just focus on one because it's more of a household name if you are in the Corvette community, and that would be Street Speed 717. He actually admitted he paid over $100,000 to get his hands on his C8 ZR1. And right now, for a majority of the content that's been out there for us to see, it's pretty much coming from him. Now, I know we have other YouTubers who just refuse to pay it and they're struggling to get their hands on cars. That's part of the reason why, like I said before, when Rick Conti came out criticizing people about, or criticizing dealers for charging people over MSRP, and I tell people this all the time, Rick Conti is one of the most resourceful people you can utilize in the Corvette community. He actually moves a lot of Corvettes and he very much specializes in them, and he has a lot of information, knowledge, and contacts when it comes to that. But he's not the only person at his dealership that sells Corvettes. Well, speaking of the salesmen, when the C8 Z06 orders were being taken, they were saying that our dealers charge it over MSRP for cars. And there was a lot of conflict or arguments because Rick Conti was saying it wasn't. Ultimately, a few weeks later, he came out and revealed he was wrong and the information had changed and his dealer was now selling over MSRP. Well, they're another location that has sold a couple C8 ZR1s, and those cars have been over MSRP. I bring this to you because the way that we've seen Corvette sales affect and happen in the past is changing right before our very eyes. And because we don't really have the power like we think we do to really impose or change this, we're seeing Corvettes now based off a concept of ordering your car and not flooding the lot with tons of inventory, that we're seeing over MSRP pricing becoming almost standard or the norm. And that's what I want people to recognize, because as long as there's not an influx of cars in the inventory, like today we see more of the base C8s built, even at this point in time when people still desire C8 Z06s, or there's a small community, and I really mean small, that like the C8 E-Ray, those cars, truthfully, because of their pricing And I know people want to say they're just priced too high. They're really not priced high based off what you're getting for the money. And I think that's the part too, is because as Corvette purists, loyalists, and owners for generations, we're used to getting a lot for nothing. I mean, think about it. The C7 Z06, that's a lot of car for a little bit of money. And when it was out brand new, most C7 Z06s had on average 4 to 5 grand rebates. And the last year of their production, the 2019 models, they were giving off almost 9 grand in rebates. Not to mention, they were also giving up dealer cash, or should I say profits in the car. So we saw C7 Z06s, 2019 models, with discounts from 12 to 18,000 off the car. Now I know today we're seeing some locations offer that to move a C8 Z06 sitting on their lot because they don't no longer want it on their inventory, but that was the norm for the 2019 C8 Z06. And so as time has progressed and these cars have now become more desirable, we're seeing a shift in the Corvette market that I think is going to carry over going forward. Now, one of the crazy things about this is the C8 ZR1 marketplace has shifted so hard that, yes, remember me reporting to you in the past that there are dealers out there charging 20 grand, 40 grand, 50 grand over MSRP. I've actually been reached out to by a couple people in the marketplace that have sat there and said, now that Ciocca is selling their cars over MSRP and at such a huge markup over MSRP, that the dealerships that they talked to at first, or that they have put down deposits on a car or on an allocation spot, have now turned around and sat there and said that, hey, we're going to raise our over MSRP pricing even higher. So a lot of the places that was originally saying 20 grand, 25,000 have reached back out and said 50 to 75. I haven't heard anybody jumping all the way to 100, but I think that's crazy when you went into this believing you had a nice location where you were going to pay 20 grand over MSRP for a C8 ZR1, 25,000 over MSRP for a C8 ZR1, or maybe even 50 grand over MSRP for a C8 ZR1, to only be informed later that that over MSRP pricing has went up. That's how the C8 ZR1 is affecting the community right now. So let that sink in, that even when you made a deal or an arrangement or agreed upon a number, the dealerships are still changing that number and changing the bar. So as consumers, how does that make you feel? So I know some of you are asking, why do I care, or why are we having this conversation, especially for a car that many people can't afford? Or should I say, let's just be realistic, 96% of the Corvette community will not be able to buy brand new, or possibly not even on the used market ever. And honestly, it's because things like this affect the landscape of the community. Things like this affect the values of your cars. And I know most people are like, hey, the C8 ZR1 has come out, so it's pushing down the pricing of the C8 Z06 and the C8 E-Ray and the C8 base. But actually, what's really pushing down the value of these cars isn't the C8 ZR1. It's the new interior design for the 2026 model year. And until those hit the streets and people decide if it's really worth the price increase, because yes, the pricing did go up for these cars. If it's really worth the money on the price increase, and how many of these cars does GM go out and build unnecessarily? And that's the key word, unnecessarily, because ultimately at this point, and I've heard the engineers come out and say that we can start to scale back on C8 production, which allows us to explore other options within the C8 platform. If you miss that information, that's the conversation piece. So if they start to scale back on production, and we're now still forced to go out and get the first generation or the first version of the C8s, the C8 Z06s and the C8 E-Rays, because they're not making as many 2026s as they did in the past when it comes to the older models from 2020 to 2025, then what we believe shouldn't be a problem is going to have an adverse effect, which many of us desire the adverse effect that as owners. And what that is by the C8 ZR1 selling so far over MSRP. Remember, there's dealerships in California asking a $300,000 markup. And if I'm not mistaken, I saw somewhere on Facebook where one of these cars has actually been sold. I don't believe it was for the 300,000 over. I believe they agreed somewhere in the 200,000 range. But one of these cars with a ridiculous markup has sold for over 150, 200,000 over MSRP. And as long as these cars are selling like this, ultimately what it ends up doing is bringing up the value of the other cars. So what do I mean by that is now we will see the C8 Z06, which has been slowly going down. If the 2026 models don't make a lot of them, we're going to see the C8 Z06 kind of steady mellow out and maybe go up in pricing just a little bit, because if you can't obtain a C8 ZR1, which many people, and I know you think I'm crazy, many people thought this car would be something they can get from Ciocca, Mac Moulton, Les Stanfield, which I believe Les is still selling at MSRP. But they thought they would be able to get their hands on one for just a little bit more money. And it makes sense. I mean, think about it. Their starting price tag is $175,000. So if you paid $186,000 brand new for a C8 Z06, or you were about to pay that for a C8 Z06, why would you not think you would just go out and get the most base stripped down version of a C8 ZR1? And because of what it is, and I say that again, because of what it is, it's still going to turn heads and it's going to be a more desirable car. And you can actually get it for C8 Z06 money, or extremely high C8 Z06 money, which in my case, or my understanding, complex, and I've said this before, I don't understand why anybody would go out and build a $186,000 C8 Z06, knowing the C8 ZR1 is coming. And in my rational thinking, that even if it was $186,000 and you can get your hands on a C8 ZR1 for $200,000, why not just pay the extra $14,000 to get a C8 ZR1? Just makes more sense. But now, since that window of MSRP buying has slowly slipped away, but you tell me, what are your thoughts? Because I'm going to sit there and say this. With the C8 ZR1 selling on average for $75,000 over MSRP, we see a lot of $100,000 offers out there. This car is shifting the market of how we look forward to Corvettes going forward. And even if it's only for higher performance models, and it sets in your mindset that you will only be able to buy a base car for MSRP, well, that's what we're starting to see. Because I can't see dealerships making this type of money, especially like Ciocca, and they're now in the game, that they won't take advantage of this going forward. So the C8 ZR1 just made it harder for you to obtain a Corvette in the future if the design is right, the performance is right, and definitely the MSRP pricing is low, but the demand is high. ICNV Driversedition. Go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel. Join the ICNV Driversedition community. Like I stated before, we're an interactive community, which means if you hit me up on any one of my social media platforms or in the comments below, I'll do my best to respond. And if the topic you bring up is interesting enough, just like this one, I may even shoot a video on it. And while we're still talking about this video, let me know what your thoughts are on this C8 ZR1 pricing, how you believe it's going to affect the Corvette market going forward, and if you think I'm right. But don't forget, we were all made in his image and given dominion over the world, and we weren't just meant to be. So chase your dreams, build your visions, never ever give up, and embrace your own identity. It is okay to be unique. He's not done with you, and he's definitely not done with me. You were given everything that you need to achieve your goals, reach your desires, and be the best version of yourself that you could be. You just need to invest in you and never ever forget to stay humble, stay focused, and stay blessed. And I'll see you in these streets. Peace.